Tonight, with an election call likely within days, Donald Trump is wading into Canadian politics. His comments on the candidates already making waves.
The Conservative that's running is stupidly no friend of mine.
What he said about who he prefers and how it's playing out here in Canada.
The president said that having a Liberal prime minister would be easier for him to deal with.
Plus, swept up in Trump's immigration crackdown, accused in campus protests.
This feels like an escalation that's far beyond a mistake.
The exclusive interview about her escape to Canada. And just how Canadian is Tim Hortons?
Oh, that's a great question.
It's not owned by a Canadian company anymore.
A patriotic debate over coffee and Timbits.
From CBC News, this is The National with Christine Barak.
Thank you for joining us. Adrian is away. The upcoming federal election has a new dynamic, with Donald Trump taking a shot at the Conservative leader and Pierre Poilievre trying to use that shot to his advantage. At a campaign-style event, Poilievre called himself a tough guy to deal with, a direct response to Trump's jab. Then moments later, he said he would put Canada first, an answer to the U.S. president's frequently used slogan of America first. Poilievre, like all candidates, is pitching himself as the leader to take on Trump, a major ballot box issue. And as Rafi Boudjikanian shows, it's already shifted the landscape of Canadian politics.
I'm a strong leader. I'm a tough guy to deal with.
Pierre Poilievre shifting campaign mode into high gear.
The president said that having a Liberal prime minister would be easier for him to deal with, just as he threatened once again to make us the 51st state.
Do you know
Riffing off of this moment from an interview Donald Trump gave Fox News less than 24 hours ago.
the Conservative that's running is stupidly no friend of mine. I don't know him, but he said negative things. I think it's easier to deal, actually, with a Liberal. And maybe they're going to win, but I don't really care.
Those comments come at a moment that sees the Liberals with wind in their sails. With Justin Trudeau gone and Mark Carney at the helm, the CBC News poll tracker now shows the Conservatives have fallen to 37.4% of the popular vote. The Liberals slightly ahead, their first lead in nearly 3 years.
In a very short period of time, the entire political world has shifted.
Trump's tariffs and threats of annexing Canada are a major factor, says this observer.
I think Pierre Poilievre has to find a way to get the upper hand on this issue, because ever since Donald Trump became the focus for most people in this country, the Conservative vote has gone down.
However, he says Poilievre has an added hurdle, with a small but sizable segment of his supporters also in favor of Trump.
Everything is broken.
Everything is broken.
For months, the Liberals have been trying to paint Poilievre and Trump with the same brush, even as they walk a fine line dealing with the U.S. administration.
I think that, what Canadians want is an adult in the room to be able to take decisions when it comes to the Trump administration and dealing with the Trump administration.
What's clear is that both sides seem ready to go, and an election call is expected in the days to come.
And Rafi, there are some obvious signs now that the election is imminent.
Liberal ministers have been broadly hinting that Prime Minister Mark Carney should have a seat in Parliament and needs a mandate. And then there are the physical signs, like a bus we saw getting wrapped in Liberal colors in Mississauga, Ontario today. And all the parties are preparing their transportation across the country.
Thanks, Rafi. Rafi Boudjikanian in Ottawa. In a developing story tonight, Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly confirmed that China recently carried out the execution of 4 Canadian citizens for drug-related crimes.
There are 4 Canadians that have been executed, and therefore we strongly condemn what happened. They were all dual citizens, and all of them, and that's the only information that I will give you.
In a statement, China's embassy in Ottawa said that the country maintains a zero-tolerance attitude toward drug crimes, urging Canada to respect the rule of law and China's judicial sovereignty and stop making irresponsible remarks. And in another sign of the strained relations, Beijing imposed 25% tariffs on Canada's seafood exports. It's in retaliation for Ottawa's tariffs on China's electric vehicles. And as Yvette Brend explains, the seafood industry is already feeling the pain.
Oh, here we go.
In normal times, lobster and crab are Canada's top-selling seafood exports to China.
I imagine with the tariffs, we won't ship any crab to China at this point.
But this Dungeness crab is caught in the tangle of a trade war, with new tariffs from Beijing in retaliation for the surtax Canada put on electric vehicles from China.
You know, if this lasts for 3 or 6 months or something like that, like where is it going to end up?
He says tariffs are already hitting the industry hard.
I mean, we try to sell to Europe and places like that, but the main market is China. So if we've got this big tariff, then we have to try to pivot, but everyone's going to be pivoting. We're all going to be fighting for little markets here and there.
It's a very real threat. We export about $400 million worth of seafood to China every year.
Seafood exports, especially like this Pacific gooey duck clam, are reliant on China that buys $75 million worth a year.
We anticipate that we'll lose like 50% of our orders.
On the East Coast, seafood dealers at this Boston Seafood Expo were already aiming at new markets because of tariffs from the U.S.
Well, we eventually, no, we're just finding other markets that, like, there's other places in the world that buy what we grow.
This industry is resilient, and this is another challenge that they're going to face, and we'll get through it.
But even for those who fish in the dangerous waters off the BC coast, fears are rising.
They are a very tough group of humans. These tariffs are going to hit pretty hard, though.
Advocates urging Canada to back off China.
Well, I hope that perhaps the Canadian government will rethink the tariffs on EVs, because the only good thing about this is it is a tariff dispute. They can be solved.
Until then, seafood sellers can only hope the latest tariff storm blows over. Yvette Brend, CBC News, Vancouver.
Also now in effect, Beijing's tariff on a key Canadian agricultural export, canola products. The 100% tariff on canola meal and oil is hitting a massive industry concentrated in the Canadian prairies. Combined with tariffs from Canada's other top export market, the U.S., canola farmers are facing a 1-2 punch just ahead of planting season. The risk of a worsening trade war with the U.S. is also posing a major problem for Canadian charities, leaving them uncertain if they'll be able to help all the people who rely on them. Julia Wong shows us the immediate impact of that lingering threat.
A frenzy of activity inside this Edmonton food bank. Here, like in much of the rest of the country, the need has been growing, all while the uncertainty of a trade war persists.
We are looking at other avenues, talking to all of our distributors and suppliers, saying, where can we get the Canadian products so that we're not hit with extra tariffs?
The food bank set aside $4 million for groceries this year. Its manager says that could jump up to $6 million because of tariffs. Beyond that, a truck similar to this one is being built in the U.S. There are worries it could get slapped with tariffs, meaning less money to buy food.
The 5-ton is about $300,000 Canadian, and we're anticipating it could be an added $50,000 with tariffs.
For this organization that supports homeless people, the tariff unpredictability is prompting questions about its buying power for groceries and to build a new shelter.
Is it going to cost us an extra 10 or 20% above what we thought? Are we able to manage that cost or not? Those are all things that we're sort of dealing with.
Which could all trickle down to those who depend on it.
There can be impacts on the level of service or the quality of service that we're able to provide to people.
As you can see, they're basically 3 townhouse-style homes.
Existing home builds are still on track for this Habitat for Humanity, but lumber and other costs could go up, meaning future homes could be at risk.
We're going to have to cut that back, which means providing fewer affordable homes.
Which could lead to delays for future homeowners, says this board member.
Individuals will not be able to, start their life, build their financial future.
A future that could include more instability, as the threat of more tariffs and counter-tariffs loom. Vulnerable Canadians among those caught in the middle. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
Ever since Elon Musk went to work for the Trump administration, Tesla has gone from being the wave of the future to facing a wave of protest, seething anger, and vandalism. As Vanessa Lee shows us, that wave has reached Canada.
Two young environmental activists filmed themselves as they spray paint the Tesla dealership. An act of vandalism in broad daylight.
They took this action to take a stand against the billionaire class. Elon Musk, who is the owner of Tesla, is currently taking control of the United States democracy and is dismantling it by defunding all environmental protections.
It's the latest in a spate of crimes targeting everything Tesla, as founder Elon Musk's influence grows in the White House. Vehicles and charging stations have been defaced or damaged, and showrooms the site of Tesla takedown protests in recent weeks. The FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force is investigating after Teslas were shot at and firebombed at a service center in Las Vegas. In Vancouver, the International Auto Show says it has removed Tesla as a participant at this week's event.
The political position on this has absolutely no bearing on the decision. This is purely from a safety point for our guests and our attendees.
Musk says he is shocked by what he calls hatred and violence from the left.
Tesla is a peaceful company. We've never done anything harmful. I've never done anything harmful. I've only done productive things. So I think we just have a deranged, there's some kind of mental illness thing going on here, because this doesn't make any sense.
But Musk has seen the haphazard slashing of the U.S. federal workforce. Some believe the backlash against the electric car maker is just the beginning of a larger movement against Donald Trump.
It's kind of the low-hanging fruit in a mass protest that is going to ramp up against, this kind of whole administration.
This growing wave of anger directed at Tesla is having an impact on its bottom line. Shares have fallen more than 40% since January. Vanessa Lee, CBC News, Montreal.
CBC News has learned the 9 Canadians on board that Delta plane that crash landed in Toronto last month have filed lawsuits against the airline. Minnesota-based lawyers filed civil cases blaming the incident on gross negligence and recklessness of the flight crew. Delta has not responded to the claims in court. Taking off from Minneapolis, the plane burst into flames after flipping over and skidding across the tarmac at Toronto's Pearson Airport. 21 of the 80 people on board were injured. This comes as Canada's Transportation Safety Board prepares to release its preliminary report tomorrow. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he supports Donald Trump's proposal for a limited ceasefire deal with Russia. The leaders spoke for an hour, marking their first conversation since last month's blow-up at the White House. Paul Hunter on what it means for the prospects of peace.
I felt no pressure from Donald Trump, said Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. It's a fact. Calling their hour-long talk substantive.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Or, as the White House put it,
today, President Trump and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky had a fantastic phone conversation.
A key result, Zelensky reportedly agreeing to what's described as a 30-day partial ceasefire in Ukraine's war defending itself against Russia. Trump writing on social media, "We are very much on track."
You don't have the cards right now.
All of it far from the jaw-dropping and alarming tone the last time the two leaders spoke.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III.
Since then, a reset of a kind on Trump's stated push to end the fighting.
Shuttle diplomacy is difficult.
U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz.
We are going back and forth at every level, driving both sides towards a ceasefire and driving both sides towards an end to this war.
All of this a day after Trump spoke for 2 hours with Russian President Vladimir Putin. But already the question, is Putin listening? Overnight, an apparent Russian drone attack on a hospital in northeastern Ukraine. Ukraine saying Russia also attacked a number of energy facilities, despite the suggestion Putin had agreed to stop such attacks as broader ceasefire talks proceed. As for a full ceasefire, Zelensky himself, while in Finland for talks, made clear yet again his immovable and biggest demand on that.
For us, the red line is the recognition of the Ukrainian temporarily occupied territories as Russian. We will not go for it.
In other words, Zelensky would accept a permanent end to the fighting only if Ukraine gets its land returned, something Russia has long signaled it firmly opposes. Christine.
Paul, what's the next step when it comes to securing a lasting ceasefire deal?
Well, more talks on how any partial ceasefire would play out and perhaps lead to something more lasting are set for the coming days in Saudi Arabia, probably to begin late this week or on Sunday. They're calling these technical discussions, meant to build on what was talked about in those 2 phone calls this week.
Thanks, Paul. Paul Hunter in Washington. The Israeli military has resumed ground operations in central and southern Gaza after a wave of devastating airstrikes. More than 430 Palestinians were killed in just 2 days, according to Gaza health officials, making it one of the deadliest episodes since the conflict began. Israel says its forces have expanded control in central Gaza, a move Hamas calls a dangerous violation of the ceasefire that had mostly held since January. The UN confirms one strike hit its Gaza City headquarters, killing a foreign aid worker. Violent protests have erupted in Turkey after the arrest of Istanbul's mayor, who is widely seen as the president's top political rival. The government accuses him of corruption and terrorism. But as Chris Brown explains, the opposition insists the arrest was politically motivated.
The arrest of Istanbul's popular mayor sent supporters into the streets, triggering clashes with riot police and fueling fears about the country's further slide into authoritarianism. It's a coup, said this protester, a coup against democracy. As the twice-elected mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu was perhaps the second most powerful figure in the country and the main political rival to President Tayyip Erdogan. Authorities detained him, alleging corruption and ties to terrorism, just days before he was expected to be selected to lead his party against Erdogan in the next presidential vote. Just before his arrest, İmamoğlu posted a video message accusing his opponents of using the police as a tool for evil and vowing not to give up. Erdogan has dominated Turkish politics for decades, first as prime minister and then as president. While the constitution doesn't permit him running for a third presidential term, he could get around that by triggering an early vote. And opponents say removing the popular İmamoğlu could be part of the plan. If that's the case, it's a massive gamble. Politically, Turkey has scored some big wins of late, including helping the opposition in Syria push out the Assad regime. Those successes could now be at risk, says this analyst.
So with this, the whole political, economic, and then the foreign policy picture has been poisoned. Societal discontent, the societal backlash will probably be very significant, will probably be huge.
Protests have been banned, although Wednesday night thousands of people came out anyway. Erdogan's officials, meanwhile, deny anything improper. They claim İmamoğlu's arrest had nothing to do with the president. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
Fraud prevention experts are sounding the alarm tonight about a high-tech twist on an age-old swindle.
And he goes, "Hi, Grandma. Police say they need some money to release me or they're going to keep me in jail."
A marketplace investigation into scammers using AI next. Amidst Trump threats and patriotic fervor, debate rages over a brand long considered a Canadian icon.
It's not owned by a Canadian company anymore,
it was
right?
founded by a Leafs player, Tim Hortons, though.
A little coffee talk over national identity. And a magical moment as space travelers return to an underwater welcoming committee.
If all of a sudden I opened up my door and there was a dolphin greeting me, I'd be all too thrilled.
We're back in 2. Artificial Artificial intelligence is increasingly part of our daily lives. While it can be helpful, it's also helping some phone scammers gain trust. Tonight, in a CBC Marketplace investigation, David Common shows us how AI has the potential to make fraudsters sound like your family and friends.
Detecting scams is about to get a whole lot harder as scammers embrace artificial intelligence.
Oh, it's a playground.
At the world's largest fraud training and prevention conference, the alarm bells are sounding. Overseas scammers are harvesting our posts and videos from social media to use against our family and friends. Former CIA officer Peter Wormcutt did it in under a minute, using me as an example.
Hi, this is David Common reporting from Las Vegas, Nevada at the 35th Annual ACFE Global Fraud Conference.
That's nuts. I spoke none of those words, but AI can clone my voice precisely from social media. It may have happened to Marilyn Crawford, an early morning phone call from a man identifying himself as the local police. Her son Kevin recounts what the caller said next.
We have your grandson in custody. He has been involved with a car theft, and we need $9,000 to release him.
It's called the grandparent scam.
They said, here, we have Ian here, and he goes, hi, Grandma. Police say they need some money to release me, or they're going to keep me in jail.
In that moment, did you believe it was your grandson in trouble?
I did. I really did.
The scammers even sent her a taxi to take her to the bank. But an alert teller there stopped Marilyn from losing any money. Just as scammers use AI for voice cloning,
hello, scammers. I'm your worst nightmare.
A British telecom is using AI to fight back.
I'm an AI created by O2 to waste phone scammers' time.
Daisy is not real, but she convincingly keeps scammers on the line.
Because while they're busy talking to me, they can't be scamming you.
All of it underscoring how much more sophisticated scams and scam busting have now become. David Common, CBC News, Toronto.
You can watch the entire Marketplace episode, Scam Stoppers, the ultimate showdown, coming up on Friday on CBC and CBC Gem at 8 p.m. That's 8:30 in Newfoundland. It's as Canadian as hockey, the Maple Leaf and Canada Geese. Or is it?
When I would take my son to hockey, the first thing we would do is buy Tim Hortons.
How Canadian is the quintessential Canadian coffee shop? Plus, accused of taking part in university protests, an international student from India flees to Canada after her U.S. visa was suddenly revoked.
It feels a bit surreal. I'm not sure what's happening. I don't know why it's happening.
An exclusive interview with a student caught in Donald Trump's crackdown. And after weeks of collecting samples from the world's southernmost continent, the science for Canadian researchers is just beginning.
We can get a clearer pictures of the past climate change and then being able to predict what's going to happen in the next 50 to 100 years.
The National breaks down the story shaping our world next. With the ongoing trade war with the U.S., companies in this country are trying to play up their Canadian roots. Among them, Tim Hortons. But as Mike Crawley shows us, its latest marketing campaign is triggering some debate about just how Canadian it is.
Over its 60-year history, Tim Hortons has often marketed its Canadianness.
Citizenship, Canadian. Proof. Roll up the rim to win.
Now these social media posts are triggering a debate. Just how Canadian is Tim Hortons?
Oh, that's a great question.
The company was co-founded by hockey player Tim Horton and businessman Ron Joyce with one outlet in Hamilton in 1964. U.S. hamburger chain Wendy's bought the company in 1995 and maintained ownership for more than a decade. Then in 2014, Tim's was taken over by Restaurant Brands International. At that time, a Brazilian firm controlled nearly half of the company's shares. Now, the ownership is more spread out, including among U.S. and Canadian investors.
Is Tim Hortons really Canadian?
It's not owned by a Canadian company anymore,
It was
right?
founded by a Leafs player, Tim Horton, though.
Yeah. Sure.
It's a Canadian company.
I think it's a Canadian company.
It's
like known for being Canadian.
The more than 4,000 Tim Hortons locations across the country are controlled by Canadian franchise owners, like Tanya Doucette.
I'm Canadian. My family, we're part of this business. We've been almost 20 years as restaurant owners, my husband and I.
Tim Hortons is totally Canadian. I think it's our claim to fame. I don't know, it's very Canadian core to me.
They're very strategic in how they're marketing this.
Natasha Kaufman runs a public relations agency.
They're saying that it's a brand that's loved by Canadians, which is absolutely true. We've been part of Canada's history for 60 years, also true. But what's misleading is that they're not owned by a Canadian company anymore.
A Tim Hortons spokesperson says its corporate headquarters and main coffee roastery are located in Canada.
I'm not Canadian myself, so for me it's quintessentially Canadian.
All food for thought in a debate happening across the country, often over coffee. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
Now it's time to dig deeper into the story shaping our world. The search for climate change secrets at the bottom of the world.
1,000 years of sediment here.
But first, how the White House crackdown on pro-Palestinian protesters led to a late-night knock on her door.
They kind of yell in the corridor saying, your visa has been revoked.
Now taking refuge in Canada, the PhD candidate says rights are being stripped from foreign students. 2 weeks ago, Ranjani Srinivasan was enrolled at New York's Columbia University, finishing her doctorate in urban planning. Now, in a Canadian exclusive, she tells David Common why she had no choice but to flee.
Donald Trump's Homeland Security Secretary calls you a terrorist sympathizer. When you hear that, what do you think?
Well, I'm not a terrorist sympathizer, so I just find it kind of absurd.
Who are you?
I'm a PhD student who actually rarely left the office because I was busy working or grading my students' papers. It feels a bit surreal. I'm not sure what's happening. I don't know why it's happening. Yeah, everything is sort of uncertain and in flux.
Srinivasan is caught up in the political reckoning over this protest last year. As the Israel-Hamas war raged, Columbia University became the focal point of pro-Palestinian action. It enraged many, Trump included. He vowed a crackdown, including on international students who protested. Srinivasan says she was never a protester, but found herself caught in Trump's dragnet. Forced to flee, crossing the border into Canada, she still fears for her safety, and asked we not reveal exactly where she is now. I want to go to a knock at your door. Who was there?
It was ICE.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Yes, that's right. I didn't hear the knock because I was on a call with my Columbia International Students Office trying to figure out why my visa had been revoked the previous day. They seemed very calm. They said, don't worry about it, it sometimes happens to people. And then my roommate actually heard the knock. She goes to the door, she asks people to identify themselves. They refuse to. After a lot of pushing, they kind of yell in the corridor saying, we want Ranjani Srinivasan, your visa has been revoked, we want to put you in removal proceedings. And this is all while I'm on the call with my advisor. She turns to me and says, just here's a list of lawyers, don't worry, things will be sorted out, start contacting immigration lawyers. I said that I haven't let them in, and then they said, just keep doing that.
They'd come to detain and likely deport her just months before the completion of her years-long studies. The Indian citizen found herself de-enrolled as a student by the university and told she cannot return to the U.S. She's also insistent she was never part of the protest and wasn't even in the city.
I had just returned to New York that day. I had been away for a year in the field doing dissertation field work in India. I returned to New York on April 30th. We didn't know what was going on. I mean, we knew the encampments were there, but we didn't realize what were the events that would unfold, that night. And then we realized the entire perimeter of the greater neighborhood has been barricaded by police. After circling for a bit, being redirected by cops, I was finally denied entrance into my building and into the street I live in by an NYPD officer. And in that confusion, I was one of the people who was detained.
You were charged. The charges were dropped. Now, the assertion from American immigration officials is that they say you should have declared this in your application for a visa, that you received this summons even if the case was promptly dropped, that you should have done that. Do you believe that's what's at play here?
If I had made a mistake, I would have been happy to have corrected it and been transparent with the officials. But this feels like an escalation that's far beyond, a mistake of that kind.
Were you part of that protest at all? Or had you been part of any protest?
That one in particular was an accident. I would not have really gone there in that area if I had known the risks. So that's why I'm even more surprised that I would be a person of interest, because I'm really a random student.
And now what?
Well, I'm actually unsure. I'm trying to appeal to Colombia to re-enroll me so that I can at least finish my degree. I think the sequence of events has kind of proven to me that they have sort of let me down, and I'm hoping that they'll, correct their mistake.
Your departure from the airport was caught on video, but the Department of Homeland Security actually released that video showing what they describe as you self-deporting. Would you agree with that characterization?
I just want to set the record straight. I was kind of confused by the language of self-deporting. I just left as anyone would leave, when they visit Canada or any other country for that matter.
Why did you leave the US?
I felt very unsafe. I could have challenged the illegal termination of my status, but from what I understand from my lawyers, that they might indefinitely detain me while I did that. So I would have to fight that from detention, which I would rather not.
When you look at a country that has prided itself for freedom of speech, where during the presidential campaign, both sides talked about the importance of freedom of speech on campus, do you believe you're seeing an example of that in the way in which Columbia students are being treated?
No, I don't. I think that really there's been an erosion of freedom of speech. I mean, it's fine to have differing opinions on difficult issues. That is the basis of any kind of academic scholarship. But not by, harassing each other or through violent means, but through intellectual debate and engagement. And I think that's completely being eroded.
If this is it, if you can never go back, where does that leave you?
Frankly, I'm trying not to think about it. I don't know exactly. Right now I'm just concentrating on the first task, which is to negotiate with Colombia and get my PhD back and allow me to re-enroll. But I guess I might have to consider that in the future if it doesn't work out.
What gives you optimism right now?
Frankly, it's the students in Colombia. People are fearful, but they are brave and angry, and they are demanding accountability. I think students all across the US are doing so, so that definitely gives me hope.
Thanks very much for the conversation.
Oh, you're welcome.
Now, David Common asked why she spoke to media despite her fear. Rajani Srinivasan said her name was made public against her will, and she wanted to deny those allegations. But she also did it for students still in the U.S. who risk drawing ICE's attention if they go public with their ordeal. Canadian scientists wrap up an unprecedented research mission to Antarctica as their Navy hosts pull up anchor and head for home.
One of my goals in coming here was to make the Navy fall in love with science.
What the partnership hopes to learn about cooperation and climate change next. Canadian climate scientists hunt for hidden knowledge in Antarctica.
The first day was a bit of a disaster for fieldwork.
There are challenges, but also payoffs.
We can get a clearer pictures of the past climate change.
The sheer isolation makes this an incredible laboratory. The Royal Canadian Navy sent HMCS Margaret Brooke on this historic mission. Our international climate correspondent, Susan Ormiston, has your exclusive close-up look.
As night falls in Antarctica, the Navy ship HMCS Margaret Brooke darkens, switching to all red light.
Slew it in.
But there's still work to do.
At the waterline.
On the quarterdeck, a hive of discovery.
Yeah, let's bring it on board.
A long net pulled out of the ocean and hosed down carries small organisms which play a vital role.
So just seeing here mostly voracious filter feeders. They eat particles, organic matter that's in the water column, and then they poop it out. So
They'll be examining these salps for contaminants.
here, this is a solitary form.
The scientists are educating the Navy's top commander, Vice Admiral Angus Topshee, on oceanography.
You'll have to forgive my science as well. I was an arts major, so anything I say the Navy has taught me.
I'll stop, please.
Where did I collect water?
Brent Else is sampling the Southern Ocean water using a CTD Lars, custom built in Canada. It plunges deep into the ocean under high pressure to capture water at different depths, here as deep as a kilometer.
Let's hold here.
Roger, holding.
The rosette, as it's called, comes up brimming with water.
And then we get a cap on right away.
For the average layperson, you know, water is water. So you've got a whole ocean out there. You're collecting water and you're putting it in all these different containers. Why?
Well, because water isn't just water. In an ocean like this, there's lots of different water masses. There's lots of different types of water at different levels in the ocean.
Are you on 10
I mostly measure dissolved carbon dioxide, and I'm interested in how carbon dioxide moves from the atmosphere into the ocean and then moves deep down in the ocean where it is sequestered for hundreds or thousands of years.
Bottle 5 has nutrients.
It's liquid gold for these scientists. Everyone wants a bit of it for their own investigations.
We all work together, we get the rosette train faster so we can go back in. And everybody gets to bed a little sooner.
The cold water in the Southern Ocean around Antarctica is a huge carbon sink, absorbing a lot of the carbon dioxide emissions we put into the atmosphere. But as the sea surface warms, that could change.
As the oceans warm, as circulation patterns change, it's expected that that ocean carbon sink will slow down over time. And the polar regions are the areas where those carbon sinks are most important.
For the last 3 weeks, 15 scientists from across Canada have turned the Navy vessel into a research ship.
50 meters.
Working with a Navy crew to maneuver the boats.
Take tile off stern as well.
Operate the crane, lower the winch, and generally assist them daily to gather up samples.
The time's 19:18, and we are at 147 feet.
In this extreme environment, there's been a lot of learning.
Good to go, you have permission to launch.
This team is trying to haul up mud from the ocean floor, using what looks like a torpedo, weighted to plunge it into the seabed with force.
150.
Jeremy Bentley is on the winch.
200.
The seabed sediment will tell them a story.
Coming back in. Gonna put them on 2 feet.
Got it?
Yeah, got it.
It definitely looks more disturbed at the top than the other one, but we'll keep this one just in case it's the best in the end.
Sophia Johannesson will slice up the cores to analyze.
Whatever happens in the surface above, the particles sink down and they build up layers in the mud, the newer ones on top of the older ones, and we can read that history back through time and we can learn from it. It's been pretty hectic. The first day was a bit of a disaster for field work. Pretty much everything went wrong that could go wrong.
They adjusted and managed to fill a fridge full of samples. Turns out all mud doesn't look the same.
If we take this core out, for example,
and it's different ages.
This is a section that's about 1.5 meters long, and so represents about probably 1,000 years of history at the bottom of the ocean.
1,000 years of sediment here.
Probably something like that. You can see that the sediment is much darker.
Alex Normando and Karen Douglas will send these samples back to Halifax to be x-rayed.
We use an x-ray, yeah. It helps to enhance areas of the core that are denser than others.
We can get a clearer pictures of the past climate change and then being able to predict what's going to happen in the next 50 to 100 years here in Antarctica.
Antarctica is a coveted lab. One of the few places in the world which has mostly escaped a heavy human footprint. Sandy Stephan and Jeff Stupple are sampling snow for what shouldn't be here. Contaminants like mercury deposits and microplastics.
They can travel long distances from source regions into remote areas like the Antarctic. So we're looking for very minuscule fiber like microplastics to see where they've come from.
Do you think they are here?
Absolutely. Mercury is a problem because once it gets into the ecosystem, it can turn into a very nasty toxic form.
They'll keep the snow frozen until it gets back to Canada for many researchers to analyze what's hidden inside.
When I talk to people about the impact of climate change on things, they just consider warming. And they consider, like the ice is melting and all this. And I said, yes, but what happens when the ice melts?
Yeah, so there's a bit of a clearance too that's closer to that iceberg on the other side.
The HMCS Margaret Brooke carried the science team well past the Antarctic Circle.
Between the two mountains, that's our channel.
Breaking ice to get through.
Okay, roger.
Revealing the powerful icy contours of Antarctica. While sailing to the most southerly point the Canadian Navy has ever been.
Port 15.
With the fieldwork in Antarctica mostly done now, the expedition turns back north.
Slow ahead, both engines.
Leaving time finally for reflection.
One of my goals in coming here was to make the Navy fall in love with science so that they would just want to, keep working with us and keep going on adventures with us. And we've had nothing but support, and that's great.
As Mission Antarctica comes to a close. So the field work is done for now here, but all those 2,000 plus samples, they'll go back to labs in Canada to be dissected and analyzed with preliminary results probably by the end of this year.
And Susan, what do you take away from this expedition?
Oh, so much. I mean, you look at those icebergs, stunning pieces of ice, thousands of years in that ice, and you can appreciate their beauty, of course, but also the massive power of this place. I mean, there's so much fresh water locked up in those icebergs. It's not hard to feel a bit small and also to understand that as Antarctica changes, we will feel it.
It's quite stunning. Susan Ormiston, thank you for all your work down there. Coming up, an underwater welcome party for NASA's returning astronauts next in Our Moment. You're looking at the capsule of SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft after it had successfully splashed down off the coast of Florida, and circling the craft, a pod of dolphins. The curious creatures milled about, delighting the NASA commentators as the astronauts were extracted from the capsule. So tonight, Mother Nature's warm welcome makes Our Moment.
Now here on your screen, we can see dolphins, actually.
The dolphin welcoming party was wonderful. I live, eat, and breathe the ocean and marine mammals. So if all of a sudden there was a dolphin greeting me, I'd be all too thrilled. Having a scientific background in marine mammals, when you get into the nerdiness of the dolphin world, I think it's very fair to say that the dolphins do not take any particular interest in space travel.
Wow, we got a cute little pod of dolphins. It wasn't just one or two.
When the capsule lands, it does create a big splash, and that creates sound underwater. And these animals are inherently curious.
Oh, dolphin cam back again.
They may want to go check out exactly what's creating the sound. It's very serendipitous for all of the trials and tribulations that the astronauts have been through to have a pod of dolphins be part of the welcome back to Earth. It was a wonderful cherry on top.
A picture-perfect landing. From all of us here at The National, thank you for being with us. I'm Christine Birak. Take care.